So if you're Canadian, you're probably going to pay attention to this one. Because while the orange guy is throwing his tantrums at the world leaders in public, there's something else happening quietly in the background. And Canada is probably going to be right in the middle of it. But on top of that, if you haven't heard about it yet, I guess you're going to hear it from me then. The orange guy recently wrote a letter to the Prime Minister of Norway, basically saying that because he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, he doesn't really have to think about peace anymore. I kid you not. This guy is the ultimate man-child. And honestly, I have friends with kids in elementary school who are more mature than this current president of the United States. But back to what I said earlier, behind the scenes, there are private conversations where the orange guy is really focused on Canada. And that's what concerns me. So we're going to talk about that in today's episode. Today's backdrop comes from Paul, a longtime viewer and supporter of the channel. He took this photo from Mount Megantic Observatory in Quebec. I mentioned the observatory a few videos ago, and he was kind enough to send over this photo. It's honestly wild to look at all those stars, to think about the possibility of other life out there, and then realize this is who we got stuck with. All jokes aside, I really appreciate you sending this in, Paul. Just a quick reminder, the rcommons.ca petition calling for a review on Canadian media and foreign investment ends on February 3rd. So if you haven't signed it yet, the link will be in the description below. The petition was sitting at about 1,500 signatures when I first featured it in my video. As I'm editing it right now, we're just over 3,400 signatures. So let's see if we can help Jessica get this to 4,000. Also, stick around to the end. I saw that many of you want me to continue sharing comments from the community, so I'll be reading out a few that resonated with me. Alright, let's get to the first video from NBC, breaking down what the orange guy really wants behind the scenes.
Carol, let me start with you on Greenland, these new threats by the president to impose these steep tariffs. I thought it was notable. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, yes, the U.S. will remain a part of NATO. You have new reporting about President Trump eyeing more of the Arctic than he might be talking about publicly. What do you know?
Yeah, that's right. I also thought it was interesting that Secretary Bessent basically said there's no deal to be had to satisfy the president, that it's acquisition of Greenland or nothing, and that the Europeans will come around to that.
This is the typical attitude of a narcissist. The belief that Europe will eventually come around is that sense of exceptionalism that exists within the orange guy's administration, and quite frankly among his supporters, and even in many US citizens. The idea that everyone will just cave to the so-called great United States. We actually talked about this on the Discord server, and it really comes down to arrogance. The belief that we should feel privileged to even be offered a chance to join the United States. Well, no thank you. I'm perfectly fine being Canadian. And I genuinely hope that the European nations stand their ground as well. I heard that France's president is suggesting to implement something called a trade bazooka against the United States. From what I understand, it would block trade, procurement, and other financial stuff, basically to protect the euro. I don't know all the details, but House of L has a really good video breaking it down. So head over to her channel and check it out, and tell her Guard the Leaf sent you. I'm not even going to attempt to explain it, so it's best that you head over to her channel and check out her video. The link will be in the description below directly to her video. But either way, Europe needs to stand its ground at this point.
And without saying why he thinks that. But yes, our reporting is that the president, while he's really focused on Greenland right now, privately, he's really intensified his focus on Canada. And he's complaining that Canada's northern border is vulnerable, and therefore that puts the U.S. as vulnerable. And he's not talking about buying Canada or taking Canada by force, but there are quiet discussions happening right now to try to get ahead of some big public blowup of this and come to an agreement that would basically ease the president's concerns. And Kristen, this is just part of a broader strategy by the president to reassert and expand American power in the Western Hemisphere.
There is absolutely no other way forward than for Canadians to say no to any proposal that comes from the United States of embarrassment. You see, all the attention right now is on Greenland, and ironically, has been taken away from the Epstein files, at least for now. Call me paranoid, but ever since I heard that the current administration actually has a real plan to take over Canada, and that the 51st state isn't a joke, you'd be lying to yourself if you think the administration and the orange guy have dropped the idea of taking over Canada. What we just heard could have been a slip-up, or a conversation that was never meant to be heard publicly, but now it is. This is why we, as Canadians, need to be on guard and guard the leaf. Because this week, his focus might be on Greenland, and if the EU pushes back hard enough and tells the bully to go fuck off, next week he could very well turn his attention to us. Things change by the day now, and quite frankly by the hour. I wake up every morning and check Blue Sky and other content creators just to see what kind of chaos happened when I was sleeping. So don't think Canada's off the hook. Sauron's eye will definitely turn back towards Canada again. Now I want to move on to the letter that the Orange Baby sent to the Prime Minister of Norway. Honestly, this letter reads like it was written by a crazy ex, someone who's bipolar, and refused to stop harassing you because you decided to cut them off. Thankfully, I'm not speaking by personal experience. But I'll read the letter out for everyone. Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although I have always been predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect the land from Russia or China, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There's no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, but we had boats that landed there also. I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now, NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you, President Asshole. This isn't something that was posted on The Onion or The Beaverton or any other satire site. This is real life. So what's my takeaway from this man-child's message? Well, he's basically saying that because he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, he doesn't need to be peaceful anymore. And with someone as unstable as him, I take that seriously. But we're not the only ones talking about this. Other content creators have been chiming in as well. So let's listen to Greg the Uber driver out of Florida.
Yes, Donald Trump sent a letter to the Prime Minister of Norway saying that peace may not be on the table anymore in his pursuit of Greenland, in effect, potentially threatening war. All this is because, he said basically in this letter to the Prime Minister of Norway, is because Norway's Nobel Peace Prize Committee did not award him the Nobel Peace Prize. What? Trump is crying because he didn't get the prize, that he now is going to go after Greenland, and potentially war because he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, Maria Machado gave him her Peace Prize, which she should have never done, and now he doesn't know her from Adam's house cat. But this is where we're going with this. Is this the sign of a stable genius to you? Right. Now, I'm never sarcastic because we're on TikTok. We have to be careful. But Trump is, in effect, threatening war with Norway over Greenland because he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize. This is scary stuff, guys. This is all scary stuff. And I argue everything ties back to distraction from the Epstein files.
I agree with Greg that this is a distraction. But at the same time, I also think the orange guy is crazy enough to actually want to take over the whole world. Now, I want everyone to hear what the media in Europe is saying about this. I'm honestly getting tired of hearing the media through the US, so this is a welcome change for me.
I mean, it's frankly extraordinary, that letter. I've read it several times today. And just to be clear, this was a response to the Prime Minister of Norway, but also the President of Finland, who traditionally gets on really well with Donald Trump. I mean, let's just break down some of it. The tone, this is the leader of the free world. And at times, it sounds like this is the moanings of a petulant child, talking about, we had a boat that landed there too, we should have the rights as well. Also, really disturbing lines. I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. That's going to be hugely worrying. I remember just a couple of weeks ago, various leaders of NATO countries were saying there's absolutely no way the US would think about invading Greenland to get hold of it. I mean, will this make them think twice?
I hope so. There's way too many people around the world, both at the citizen level and at the government level, who are taking what's happening right now far too nonchalantly. We're dealing with a psycho X with a 12-year-old brain and someone who can't take no for an answer. And he controls the nukes. So what more do people need to start taking these threats seriously? But more importantly, at the government level, when are the governments actually going to stand up to the bully? Sending troops to Greenland is a good start, but I think they need to send more. They need to show the 12-year-old man-child that they're not messing around.
And then another line, which I think will have NATO leaders really feeling like they're banging their heads against a brick wall, is this idea that Denmark can't protect Greenland. And I think what I've heard from numerous leaders, whether it's the EU foreign policy chief, the Germans, people around the EU, is that they're not asking Denmark to protect Greenland alone. They're saying this can be done as part of NATO, and the US is obviously a key part. They're not saying you can't play a role in it. They're saying you should be playing a big role in this because you're a key member of NATO. And I think they'll be wondering, well, if you want more bases in Greenland, it's highly likely you can have them. If you're so worried about security, why have US troops been reduced from thousands to a few hundred? You know, if you want to have access to rare earth and other precious minerals on Greenland, you can apply for the permits.
This right here. The orange potato doesn't want to fill out a form or apply for a permit. He wants it for himself. And what I honestly think is the real reason? Pride. There's no reasoning with someone this unstable. An absolute man-child.
So they're saying you don't need to do this alone. It doesn't need to be us versus you. We can all do it under NATO and be safer together. They all agree that the Arctic does need more security. That's why they sent this exploratory mission last week, they say, that antagonised Donald Trump and led him to announce these potential tariffs on the 8 countries that did that. But they really aren't getting through, it seems, this message that we're not against you, we're trying to do this with you.
What I see is government-level officials still trying to reason with the orange guy. And that ship has sailed a long time ago. We can't expect the orange guy to say things like, yeah, maybe you might be right. Or, okay, that kind of makes sense. Or sure, I was wrong. He'll definitely never say the last one. Ever. Well, what it feels like is that we're tiptoeing around the real problem, trying not to upset the orange guy, when we already know that nobody can control him. I get it. This is far more complex than me, an amateur YouTuber, venting into a microphone. But we're in uncharted territory now. Well, not completely uncharted, but it does feel like we're drifting closer to the kind of scenario we saw in the 1930s, before World War II began. I wasn't around back then. I don't think many of us were. But I also don't want to see anything like that happen again. Now, I'm going to cut the interview here, but if you do want to watch the rest of it, I'll leave a link in the description below. But I do want to take this time right now to read out some comments from the community in my videos. Now, these comments are in no particular order. We, a family of 6 from the Netherlands, have vacationed in the US at least once a year for the past 20 years, for at least 6 weeks per vacation. We spend about an average of $25,000 per vacation. Now we've definitely decided not to go to the US. We're going to focus on vacationing in Canada. As long as the US population doesn't rise up en masse against the unhinged president, this will continue. We have no business being there anymore. Thank you, Jeff, for helping to support Canada. Now, this is one that actually really resonated with me. Mark says, I lived overseas. Many Canadians do not understand what we actually have, how they should be proud, and lucky we are to have what we have. Nine Moon Planet actually said, I saw that, lived where water costs money, and the homes were built in the 1960s cinder block, and very little insulation. But trains ran almost every hour running on electricity, quiet, comfortable, and relatively cheap. Buses and trolleys crowd out cars. I learned to deeply appreciate the cultures, plural, in Canada. I always told people I'm Canadian, never American. And I do the same as well. If anyone ever asks if I'm American, I say no, I'm from Canada. On the topic of water, I've also lived in a place where water costs money. I was so used to just drinking water from the tap in Vancouver. But during my first stint away from Canada, I made the mistake of actually drinking water from the tap. And let's just say I was sick for 3 days with a puke bucket beside my bed the whole time. So these small things that we have in Canada, like drinkable water from the tap, don't take those things for granted. This next one comes from Brimstone, who says, I recently opened the question to my friends who still go down to the US. The answer is basically the same for them all. They enjoy their time and they pretend like nothing's happening in their gated trailer park or island resort. Being the person I am, I press them on why they support a fascist regime. They want to live their lives, content in ignoring the now present threats coming from the US. I'm dumbfounded at how simple, vapid, selfish, and willfully ignorant so many seem to be. Head in the sand until the surprise from behind, I guess. It's sad that some people may not realize or understand until something personally actually happens to them. This one's from one of our members named Live and Write. I love you sharing the voices of normal people. To the point of your first clip, my wife is an American of color and lives in Vancouver. She goes for her Canadian citizenship in the near future, but her mother is quite ill and lives in Portland. She just got back from visiting her mother for a week today. Her second day, there was a CBP shooting in Portland. My wife wasn't answering her phone. Both myself and her best friend were trying to get a hold of her, but no avail. Turns out she was grocery shopping for her mom and forgot her phone at home. She's totally fine, but it freaked us out. She has to go, but it scares the hell out of me every time. It's sad that we live in a time where if our loved ones have to go to the US, we feel the need to constantly check in on them or make sure they're carrying their IDs at all time. just to make sure nothing happens to them. I can completely understand with live and right situation. When it comes to family, you do what you have to do. But for those with heads in the sand and only caring about themselves, do you think they ever stop to think about other people around them who care about them? Probably not. And last one for today. To all the idiots who say Canada is broken, who claim they want Trump to save them, or to say they want to leave, tell me your story. I lived through 16 years of civil war before moving to Canada some 30 years ago. I saw death many times. I was hit by rocket shrapnel more than once. I saw people burned alive, people beheaded, and people dragged behind trucks while still alive. I lived in constant fear and constant vigilance. I lost school friends who were playing with guns. I was humiliated and regularly threatened by militias. We lived for months at a time without power or running water, without bread or even basic necessities. Yet, I was one of the lucky ones who was accepted by a lovely country, which I adopted as my own. I will not lose another home because of stupid people who think giving up on one's country is easy, or that betraying one country is a joke. I am Canadian, and I will fight for this country with all I have and all that I am. I fight for not the ruling party, but for my country, regardless of who is in control. Do you want to experience PTSD for the rest of your lives from every loud noise, from the sound of fireworks going off by a nearby park? You do not know what it means to lose your country. Believe someone who has already had his taken from him. If you heard this and you feel absolutely nothing, then you're part of the problem, and I honestly don't want you on my channel. This person has lived through incredibly tough times. He had far more devastating things happen to him and his family and his friends than most Canadians ever will experience. I personally can't imagine what he's been through, and it really puts things into perspective for me. This man was dodging rocket shrapnel and militia. He was watching his school friends die, while I was playing hockey, video games, going on fishing trips, and having all the basic needs met. I know how fortunate I am, and I'm not afraid to admit that, because I've also experienced living in a country where poverty is everywhere. And because of that, I am grateful for Canada. We are incredibly fortunate as Canadians. There are far worse things happening outside of our country than most ever truly will understand. So loopy de loop, if you're watching this, please reach out to me via email. I genuinely would love to speak to you. And for those who continue to complain about Canada, while you're enjoying the free healthcare, clean running water, and functioning civil systems, go experience what Loopy Loop has lived through. You might learn a few things. That's all I have for the community comments in today's video. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to continue doing these. And for anyone wondering where the co-host is, I think I finally figured it out. I have to keep her on my desk while recording. She does press a few keys here and there, which is kind of annoying, but honestly it's better than her howling in the background the whole video. I'm sure she'll be howling again in the future, so don't worry about that. You can't keep this monster contained. If you found any value in anything I said in today's video, help out my channel by hitting the like and subscribe button below. And feel free to share this video with your friends and family. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.